Welcome to YourTown. My name is Susan Shillinglaw, and I'm the director of the National Steinbeck Center. I'm holding a painting by Kevin Milligan, who is my guest on the show. He's an artist with a gallery in Carmel on Lincoln Street, the Kevin Milligan Gallery. So Kevin, this is a painting of China Cove, and part of your project that we're going to talk about today. It's a lovely, lovely painting. And you do it from plein air, right?
Correct. I paint all my scenes on site, so this is typical of what I've been doing along the coast for 25 years. I've been painting from Point Sur to Mendocino, California. I take the viewer one painting at a time, 275 miles. And this Point Lobos is where this China Cove is located, is the second chapter in the new book.
Good. Well, we'll put China Cove aside for a minute, and I'd love to ask you some more questions about your project. Of course, I always bring the conversation back to John Steinbeck and China Cove, and Point Lobos was one of his favorite places. So let's start there. And how many paintings have you done of China Cove?
I've just made 3 only in the last 21 years. I did one as a tourist that's included in the book. I just worked on a second painting in March and April, and now this is my third painting done in May, June. And I've been tied to the pictorial spanning the coast, so I haven't been just focusing on one subject.
Yeah, so you've done other scenes at Point Lobos?
Right, I have 3 other scenes, one of Hidden Cove near where Edward Weston's cove at Weston Beach is named after Edward Weston. I'm close to that one. And then I've got 2 centering on Whalers Cove in the front where the Chinese lived, and have interviewed the descendants of the first Chinese family that was there at Whalers Cove.
Oh, good. Well, let's talk about your book project that's your forthcoming book. And can you tell me the title of it and what your intention is with this book and the paintings included in the book?
The title is Big Sur to Mendocino, Coastal Stories and Legends with Coastal Paintings and Stories with Legends Revealed. So that's the secondary title, which hints that there's a text that goes with the painted pictorial. As I said, they're all made outside, spanning the coast. And I've conducted research and interviews, and that's to comprise the text mostly of early pioneers and artists. That's the basic focus of the text that pairs the paintings with particular aspects of the text that relate.
Okay. And why did you decide as an artist to work on a book that contains both text and images?
I was interested in the history, and I cut my teeth with my first book about Mendocino. When I moved up to Mendocino, I didn't know I'd become an author and I'd write. I'm known more as a painter, not a writer. But I'd been writing for years and kind of a closet writer, and then I decided to bring my research and writing forward in my first book, and then the first book is Mendocino, a painted pictorial, which made the Smithsonian was a very rich and rewarding experience. And so I wanted to follow up on that. I had to somehow top that. And so I hatched the plan, Big Sur to Mendocino, so I only have myself to blame on that one.
So you've been working on it for how many years?
Well, off and on for 25 years. I've been painting the pictorial in earnest since 93, 94. I've made about 400 paintings, and 200 of them are in my first 2 books, including the second book.
Oh, good.
There's another 110 coming out in this next book.
Oh, wonderful. And why did you decide on that scope? You knew Mendocino, obviously, having lived there, and now you live in Carmel and have a gallery in Carmel. But was that the decision? Was it personal that those were the areas that you knew best?
Well, it's a good question. I've been asked that a couple of times, like, what the heck were you thinking? And I have a few reasons to explain what I was thinking, but it was, and at first I wasn't sure whether I would start from the north and go south in the book or start at the south, but then it made more sense as I moved to Carmel. I didn't really know that was going to happen, but it just worked out that way, and it made sense as I was able to round out the pictorial. But there's some local history just down the street is John Cooper Rogers Bautista's adobe and his half-brother Larkin. They were involved in a shipwreck that landed all the way up to where my book ends at Casper. So it was tracing connections like that, where Larkin's family was actually involved in building this opium runner that they didn't want anyone to know they were involved in the illegal trade.
And where was that now?
And the opium runner was running runs from Canton, China to Hong Kong. I'm sorry, from India, from Bombay to Hong Kong. And their family.
And then on to California?
And then they were trying to do one honest run after 6 years of illegal runs. They tried to do one honest run, and that's when it all went to heck.
Oh.
The boat was designed, actually it was Cooper that piloted the boat. Before that, the Eveline that came from China, filled with goods from China, into this San Francisco, where you could fetch any price you wanted for things that just weren't manufactured yet in California, and had to get them from either China or maybe Boston. So they were trying to pattern that next ship after what Cooper had done with the Eveline on the Frolic. And the Frolic was a steamship, a sailing vessel that steam was coming into vogue and was kind of past its prime, and there was some rot in the boat. So they figured they could get one more run out of it and make untold fortunes.
And they couldn't.
And they couldn't. They hit a reef just north of Mendocino and Casper.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So there's connections, yeah. There was
good.
shipwreck that actually triggered the discovering of Mendocino.
Oh, interesting. So you're really interested in the legends that are part of the coast history, and are you interested in contemporary stories as well when you paint? Or
it involves both. The theme is pioneers and artists, so sometimes there's stories that bring something forward that just happened fairly recently. You never know where it's going to go until I read it and see it, but I've kind of wind these themes through the text of the book to keep it cohesive.
Oh, good. So the text is about legends and stories of the coast, and then do you paint thinking about the text or thinking about some of the stories, or do you just try to capture the image? You say you're interested in the pictorial. Does that mean you're interested in just what you see, or are you thinking of the stories as you paint?
It's a good question. For some, they probably would use historic photos and think about the pioneers, but in my style, I believe that emotion's best created, and when style is more unconscious, and I don't think of a style and just paint it as I see it. And I believe emotion will be conveyed. If it's going to be conveyed, it could be conveyed that way. Best for me. No wrong or right answer there, but I'm faithful to what I see, and faithful to what I learn and write about, and that's the connection there.
Okay, good. So faithful to what you see. Do you paint? Do you try to paint the coast in different weather patterns, or dark and light? Do you try to paint during the day, since you're working outside as a plein air artist? How do you contend with issues of light, or what's your awareness of light? I just saw, Monet's Haystacks in Chicago at the Art Institute, so I'm kind of aware of that sequence, obviously, as we all are. But do you try to do anything like that? Capture
Well, I have windows of time. Yes, quality of light is crucial. That's what one of my passions is to describe a quality of light in space. The only way to achieve that, the best way to achieve that, I think, is to work on site and try to figure out the mid-tone colors. It's the one weakness of photography is the capture of the mid-tone. Photography captures textural minutia and fleeting atmospheric perspective, or atmospheric qualities, rather, like fog, for instance, that we have a lot around here. But I've been known to paint 4 paintings in a day. That's kind of my record, where I can't do more than 4, but I'll switch and do a circuit where I have a morning, a midday scene, a late afternoon, and an evening scene, and when the sun is up long for a long time in the middle of the year. So I'm consistent to a light pattern, just like a cinematographer or other artists might look for shadow patterns. Is very crucial in painting. Mm-hmm. So I'm figuring that out with each painting. It's a fun part of the creative process just to make those selections.
Oh, good. And do you do mostly water and coast, or do you try to do inland scenes as well in this book, which traces Highway 1?
It's a little more. Once in a while I go slightly inland, but because of the scope. It was there was so much subject matter available to me. It was more of a problem trying to keep it from becoming too large of a project than it was. So I stick mostly to the coast, and I don't feel restricted by that. There's good natural scenes of open fields and rock formations, and it encompasses a lot of water, as you've mentioned, the bays, rivers, estuaries, and the ocean itself. And so that keeps me pretty busy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly as is the end of the California is the end of the continent, a place where you can stand and think about, what the ocean suggests has inspired, Walt Whitman, Robinson Jeffers, and of course many other visual artists in Carmel and along the coast. But how do you expect your work to, situate itself in that sort of history of people contemplating this Pacific coast and thinking about what it means? What does it mean to you? Like, what is the main message that you want your book to convey?
Well, even though I'm painting what I see, I do have feel the spirit of those artists with me, and I've always been inspired by their works, and so that's what it's feel good about, how these artists have been lived in these places and have been used as a backdrop or an inspiration for major works. And I guess a critic's going to have to be left to analyze my relationship to that. I'm not sure I can effectively be that person, but I am inspired by what I see and want to convey that through a quality of light and space realizations, and share the joy of living in both the writing and the painting.
Okay, I like that joy of living. So you think that there's a kind of positive experience driving along the coast because there's the sublime landscape around, really a sublime landscape around almost every turn.
Yes, it's boggling, and it is that inspiring, and I try to bring those great vibes forward in either the visuals or the writing. I tell moments that were telling in an artist's career. Sometimes they might have been going through a difficult time. Sometimes it was a major triumph.
What do you mean by that? You mean that you reference other artists in your book?
Right. I reference other artists, and I hope to turn the project as being considered as a museum exhibition that will include these artists. My book only features my work because there's enough books already featuring other major of these artists that I've written about. But,
and what artists have you written about in the book?
Well, legends down here. E. Charlton Fortune, the great woman painter, I think she's is better than maybe all the men painters of that era. She's very strong.
What era would that be?
That she painted here, and she moved here after the earthquake in '06 and painted here in 1910 in the teens, the early part of the 20th century. And I have interviews with Edward Weston's son, the great photographer, Kim Weston's son, Edward Weston's grandson. I have information about Ansel Adams, telling moments where they're in a byplay, Edward and Ansel digressing how they're getting ripped in the media for not photographing the beauty of nature and not really taking on political topics. The book's far-reaching.
That's an interesting question. Do you feel that could be said of do you worry about that with your own work, or
sure.
that you're?
I've heard those same comments. I let them give my retorts for me. They were pretty strong about it. They said, "Who's to describe what the realities are? They're different for all of us, And I feel."
So that's interesting. So somebody who wants art to be political and make a statement, what they're saying is that art is simply enjoyed for aesthetic pleasure, right?
Right, yes, and there's no wrong or right answer. There's some should do one and some should do another. I don't feel everyone should do it my way, but there's room for capturing the beauty of something as someone has done in poetry or other kinds of music, for instance, but there's room for both, I think.
Okay, so you mentioned Ansel Adams and Weston. Do you feel like you're trying to do in paint what they were doing with photography, and you get more of that middle ground that you talked about in your work?
Well, I think Ansel wasn't interested in the middle ground so much. He pushed the lights and darks like a painter that worked from photography where I trying to get what's in between, and maybe a little more like Edward Weston. He did vignette views though, but I do more like Carlton Watkins did, the photographer that influenced both of them, who's mentioned in my book. In fact, I mentioned this line, the best general view. He did a little more pullback where Edward Weston was getting up close in the tide pools at Weston Beach, where I paint right around that, where this painting we've just shown you is two coves away from. But I don't do as many vignettes. I do a little bit more Carlton Watkins, the best general view, which I learned that line when I came here to California over 30 years ago, and it stayed with me. And Edward Weston's line was, a pine cone or a rock is as expressive as a line of the unemployed. And I stay with that. So I remember that one from a photographer friend telling me that.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, so it made me think about the whole thing. And like I said before, it's not really a wrong or a right answer, but Dorothea Lange was photographing the faces of the downtrodden, and that's where they were being criticized, where they weren't taking on these political topics.
Right. Certainly in the 1930s, a lot of artists became more political in their work, and so at that time, I think Weston and Ansel Adams might have been critiqued, as were other writers for not, or other writers and artists for not taking on political issues.
Right. I think that if you try to paint something or write about something that's beautiful, you're not guaranteed any success with your work. And those that take on political topics, the same thing. It might be wet lettuce. It might not be very, descriptive of these political topics and the energy involved in there too. Neither one do you get any carte blanche, success.
Right.
You have to earn it, whichever style you pick.
Oh, that's a nice way to put it. So your book will be out soon?
It should go to press this summer and be available very soon.
Oh, good, good. Well, again, we'll be featuring your book at the National Steinbeck Center and have you come speak about some of your images, and it'll be available at your gallery, of course, in Carmel, which is a wonderful, I visited last weekend, it's a wonderful place, and at the National Steinbeck Center, and other local bookstores will have it, right?
Yes, they will, yes, thank you.
You can talk about, certainly we'll be able to hear you talk about the book, I'm sure, in local venues. So, well, thank you, Kevin. Do you have anything else to add?
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed our visit.
Oh, good. Me too. So thank you very much.